And now, this.
Okay, let's go. Harry Tracy.
Harry Tracy! Trigger warning. The following contains the authentic accounts of factual historical figures and events. If historical information may upset you, then please withdraw now. Retreat.
Well, I guess you know who I am.
Harry Tracy is a true story. This telling is authored from sources spanning over 120 years. All characterized quotations are verbatim from interviews, newspaper articles, and testimonials taken at the time. Scott Martinez. Part 8.
Blood in Ballard. Yesterday was a red-letter day in the erratic career of Harry Tracy.
The city of Seattle was astir on July 4th, 1902.
Tracy's trail of blood. Oregon convict kills 2 officers near Seattle.
The day before, escaped convict Harry Tracy killed Neil Raleigh, policeman E.E. Breeze, Deputy Sheriff Charles Raymond, and Sheriff John Williams, in 2 separate gun battles.
Desperado engages in 2 hot battles and continues his wild flight.
Harry Tracy instantly disappeared after the first bloody shootout in Ballard. He acted like a real gentleman. Harry Tracy hijacked Lewis Johnson in his buggy near Green Lake.
Give me your name and address.
Why?
Because I have troubled you a lot, and if I ever do get a big wad again, I'm gonna make things square with you. See?
Lewis Johnson became convivial with Harry Tracy and later declared that they talked easily. Why are you going back to Seattle? Don't you know that Sheriff Cudahy is close on your track?
Sheriff Cudahy is crowding me too closely. I want to get back to Seattle. This isn't a bluff. I want to get into the city before daylight.
Have you any hope of escaping?
I have had success so far.
Mrs. Van Horn was home and entertaining an elderly neighbor named Mr. Butterfield when Tracy knocked on the door. As Tracy entered, his buggy driver Lewis Johnson in tow, Mrs. Van Horn asked why her house.
It looked cozy.
Soaking wet, Tracy took Butterfield's clothes. Mrs. Van Horn furnished the elder Butterfield with a shawl. Removing the wet garments to be dried, she took the occasion to inventory Harry Tracy's pockets.
A razor, a broken piece of looking glass, a pocket knife, a small bottle of oil, and some letters. One of the letters in the upper right-hand corner was printed, Davis and Gilmore, Attorneys, Seattle. Tracy did some snooping himself and found a wounded young man in bed, upstairs, who had been thrown from a horse.
You're all right. You can't move.
After proclaiming the boy harmless, Tracy found a gun. The revolver was not the .45 he wanted, but a .38, not ideal, but far better suited for close quarters than his Winchester. There was a knock at the door, the grocery boy. Tracy warned her as he had her open the door, his Winchester ready. Mrs. Van Horn was able to silently mouth,
Tracy!
The grocery boy understood the alert, rushing directly back to Fremont, where word was sent. Sheriff Edward Cudahy, alerted that the escaped convict, now murdering men with seeming impunity across his city, was presently holding hostage the Van Horn home near Woodland Park.
It is my opinion that Tracy is crazy and that he will shoot any man on sight.
Sheriff Cudahy gave citywide orders directing all police and all posse members not to proceed to the Van Horn residence.
It is dangerous to have so many men after him.
Policeman Frank Breeze, Neil Raleigh, a game warden from Fremont, and a local insurance man named J.I. Knight raced to the Van Horn residence.
A lot of young fellows beating up the timber up there by Woodland Park that know nothing.
Breeze, Raleigh, and Knight. The 3 men arrived armed and ready to confront Harry Tracy, but were oblivious of Sheriff Cudahy and 2 of his men who had already taken position around the home. Breeze, Raleigh, and Knight making no effort to disclose themselves. Harry Tracy immediately emerged from the house into the darkening night. He flanked himself with Farmer Lewis Johnson on one side and neighbor Butterfield still in his shawl on the other. Tracy moved from the porch into the front yard. Breeze and Raleigh began to rush in on Tracy, with the obvious danger of Harry Tracy holding Johnson and Butterfield as human shields and his fugitive target further obfuscated by the rush of Breeze and Raleigh. There was no clear shot. Sheriff Cudahy and his men maintained their position and held their fire.
Maintain your position.
But Harry Tracy did not. Neil Raleigh screamed,
Tracy, you get him up and you be quick about it.
As the warning left Neil Raleigh's mouth, bullets left Harry Tracy's gun. There is a discrepancy as to whether Harry fired the .38 revolver, newly acquired from the Van Horn home, or his Winchester, or both. But by both accounts, Tracy fired immediately, killing without hesitation. Policeman Frank Breeze died instantly. Game warden and coal miner Neil Raleigh was mortally wounded and passed by morning. There was some speculation that the bullet that killed Raleigh had come from the gun of the local insurance man with him, J.I. Knight. Sheriff Cudahy claimed he got off 2 shots at Harry Tracy, 2 misses. The dark and the rain, the confusion and the gunshots, and the fact that the Van Horn home sat at the southwest corner of Woodland Park all became allies in Tracy's escape. Miss Van Horn refused to sit for a picture, saying she had enough notoriety. The sale of extra newspaper editions surged, one publication producing 8 different publications the next day.
Tracy's Trail of Blood. Oregon convict kills 2 officers near Seattle. Governor McBride calls out the state militia.
Sheriff Cudahy, who had been grazed in the neck, arresting Seattle's last deadly and infamous outlaw, Thomas Blank, had ridden the notoriety to success and was now expected to produce similar results in regard to Harry Tracy.
Sheriff Cudahy has called in all his posses. His plans to be changed. The cunning outlaw again eluded his pursuers.
Mayor Thomas J. Humes, who history now remembers most as a man resembling Mark Twain, was let down, as was Governor Henry McBride and the moneyed interest of Seattle. The 1902 4th of July weekend was planned to be noted for the ceremonial events around the battleship Nebraska keel-laying ceremony, the patriotic and prosperous opportunities that came with this major milestone in military production and shipbuilding in Seattle. But there was only one dominating topic of discussion: Harry Tracy. As newspapermen swarmed around the Van Horn house, collecting the story for the ever-increasing appetite for more Tracy, Harry doubled back again to Fremont and slept in a cemetery. The next morning, Harry Tracy appeared at the home of August Fisher, a recent immigrant from Germany, living 6 or so miles northwest of Fremont.
I am Tracy, and I want you to get me something to eat and do it quick. I am hungry as a bear. Both of you must come inside the house with me, and if you make any movement that looks like you mean me injury, I will kill you.
Tracy took a worn set of clean clothes from the Fishers.
I would prefer the black hat you have there, but I guess it's your Sunday article. As you appear a poor man, I will leave it.
Mrs. Fisher declared,
I would have poisoned Tracy, but he watched me too closely.
I will not tie you people up because someone will have to attend that baby. Give me your solemn promise that you will not tell anyone that I have been here for the next 48 hours.
The Fisher family did not report Harry for the next 24 hours. Leaving the Fisher home, Harry then made his way back to Meadow Point, the very same spot where he'd landed previously, and found a Japanese fisherman who spoke very sparse English and forced the man into service for a ride across the Puget Sound and out of Seattle. Bainbridge Island lies across the Puget Sound from Seattle by about 10 miles. The abducted Japanese fisherman landed Harry above Port Madison by several miles and was then warned not to tell anyone anything, even in broken English.
The Japanese is still keeping quiet.
Tracy soon appeared at the Bainbridge home of John Johnson.
I am Tracy, and you best let me in.
Tracy read the papers, learning how Miss Van Horn had betrayed him to the grocery boy.
My carelessness in this respect made it necessary to kill 2 officers.
The detailed accounts of his exploits included how he'd gunned down Sheriff Raymond and then killed Raleigh and Breeze outside the Van Horn house.
That was a useless waste of life, but Cudahy was pursuing me too close, and I had to do what I did.
When Tracy left Bainbridge Island, he left well-fed and had John Anderson, a large young man who worked for the Johnses and spoke very little English, tie the family up with instructions to bind the child and Miss Johnson very loosely. Tracy then helped himself to the Johnsons' newer 14-foot boat, took their young hand John Anderson with him as labor, and had Anderson row them into the night. The U.S. Revenue cutter Grant left Port Townsend searching the Puget Sound for Harry Tracy. Literally, the Navy had been called out. Tracy and Anderson tried several attempts at finding the mouth of the Duwamish River, but did not succeed in doing so they abandoned the boat.
As Tracy allies in Seattle.
You know these people are looking for me.
John Anderson also declared that he witnessed Harry Tracy meeting up with friends.
Captain Anderson rescued. He gives information which makes it certain that 4 men are aiding the fugitive. Anderson tells of his trip. Captive makes it plain that Tracy is being aided by friends.
Young Anderson declared just before they reached the railroad bridge over the Black River, tributary of the Duwamish, they met 4 men. Anderson could not identify any of the men, but did say Tracy referred to one of them as Fred. Blindfolded and bound, Anderson was left alone for hours. After meeting with at least 4 other men, and on his return to Anderson, Harry had found a new group of friends, picking blackberries. First meeting young Charles Gurrell, and then his mother, Mrs. Gurrell.
Well, I am Tracy.
Harry had them all return to the Gurrell home, a 2-story frame house located a mile east of what was Renton proper at the time, about 100 feet from the Cedar River, close to the railroad tracks where they'd been picking blackberries. Harry Tracy then gave Charles Gurrell, an 18-year-old, 2 watches, one of them being Anderson's. He instructed Charles to go to town and sell the watches and buy him 2 Colt 45s with 6-inch barrels, and not to alert the law. "I'll help you, Tracy. I'm kind of scared, but I will help you." Young Charles Gurrell went directly to the sheriff's office in Seattle and told them that Harry Tracy was holding his family captive. Harry was carrying water in from the spring and saw a special train with deputies on board. From cover, Tracy watched as they disembarked just a quarter-mile away. He then returned to the Gurrell household to have lunch. The women all reportedly chatted easily with Harry, Miss May Baker later declaring Harry to be
a gallant, tender-hearted man with a prodigious love for little children.
Young Charles' betrayal had brought a swarm of policemen, posse, and newsmen. Soon it was evident to all that there was a growing crowd of lawmen and reporters directly outside the home.
Look at them. They want the reward money.
Mrs. McKinney was not as impressed with or as nice to the dashing bandit Harry Tracy as young Miss Baker and the other women evidently were.
A Seattle banker just added $1,000 to the reward, I hear.
If I meet him face to face, I'll let him try and earn it.
A burly man wearing a deputy's badge approached the home alone and knocked on the front door.
Is Tracy in there?
What would Tracy be doing in my kitchen?
Mrs. Gurrell's answer was enough to repel the possemen, baffled, from the house, providing a crucial stay of the inevitable flood of law that was soon to arrive in the home. The home was surrounded, the area dense with law.
Looks like they're not covering the river very well.
Harry Tracy slipped outside into the darkening rain of the afternoon.
You have beastly weather here on the Puget Sound. Why, it has rained the whole time nearly since I landed here. I think this is an unhealthy country.
Tracy walked down to the riverbank with his rifle in his hand. Several posse members reportedly saw him from the railroad tracks, but they thought he was one of the deputies. Harry Tracy disappeared.
Tracy again escapes. Surrounded by deputies, sheriffs, he gives them the slip.
On arrival, Sheriff Cudahy soon sorted out what had happened and directed Guard Carson and his bloodhounds to the river bank.
Halfway between the Cedar River and the Burroughs boathouse, both dogs ran into cayenne pepper sprinkled on the outlaw's retreating footsteps.
As a courtesy to his canine pursuers, Tracy had left a thick trail of cayenne pepper.
Cayenne pepper dropped in tracks. Put dogs off scent for a time.
July 9th. Harry Tracy appeared at the home of rancher E.M. Johnson and family near the Green River Valley area.
Tracy looked tired and worn out. He complained that his left leg hurt him. Tracy tiring. Outlaw thought wounded.
Tracy directed Johnson to ride a horse to Auburn and then take the train to Tacoma.
Have you any money? You've got to get me 2 6-shooters. I must have them.
Tracy instructed Johnson to buy 2 .45 caliber revolvers, but not from the same store. He knew the time the train departed from Auburn and how long the excursion would take, declaring Johnson should return by 6 p.m.
If you don't get the guns and come back alone, I'll kill your wife and children.
It was 8:30 a.m. when Johnson made for Auburn. Along with her teenage son and daughter, Mrs. Johnson was left to wait with Harry Tracy.
Have you ever heard me doing something bad to women or children?
Mrs. Johnson declared Harry bragged of robbing banks with the Wild Bunch.
Robbed 5 banks in quick succession with 2 other men.
Mrs. Johnson said it made Harry mad to see stories about him in the papers.
Anderson told a lot of lies about how I treated him. I did tie him up. It was necessary.
E.M. Johnson was able to acquire a single .45 and 2 boxes of ammunition and return home by 4 p.m. E.M. arrived early, but was profusely apologetic that there was only 1 gun, not 2, and that it had a 7-inch barrel, not 6, as instructed. Harry disappeared for 3 days, and on Saturday, July 12th, limped up a country road to a small and secluded house near the Green River, south of Black Diamond. The home was owned by the Portreaux, an older French couple.
I guess you know who I am.
He did not look like a criminal. He treated us very nicely. It was hard to believe that he had such a black record.
The elder couple proclaimed that they felt no fear in the outlaw's presence and thought that he was on the edge of physical collapse.
I got wounded in the back just above the left hip. I was hit with buckshot.
Guard Carson and his bloodhounds and a posse showed up the next day and could find no trail. Harry Tracy had disappeared again.
So if you watch that whole video, you're pretty cool. The preceding was one part of a 9-part project. To watch the next part, click here. Or to view the entire Harry Tracy documentary, click here. Well, that's just damn good news.